All right, well, let's get right into this, into Chapter 1, Phonological Awareness from the Alaska's Reading Playbook. Okay, so this is going to just be an overview of the chapter, and then we will get into some more specifics about actually secondary learners, because as you might know already, and as I've found out after a lot of research, there isn't actually a lot of information specifically about how to teach phonological awareness to the secondary level. So first, phonological awareness. This is just an overview of Chapter 1. So you already know most of this, so I just want to highlight a few key points. It is essential foundational skill for reading and all literacy, the ability to recognize sounds and different sound components and elements and being able to put them together is essential for all reading. So there are 44 sounds in English, and that's important to note because we tend to focus on the letter sounds. And there's actually been some research done that maybe we shouldn't even be teaching letter sounds and we should just go straight into the 44 phonemes, because it's sometimes confusing when you see PH and you think P, H, instead of just one sound F. Phonological awareness, although it is the absolute base beginning of literacy, when children are just learning how to speak and copy and mimic words and sounds, it is also still a core deficit with older struggling readers. So we need to figure out how to fix that, to get rid of that deficit, right? With these adolescents that might still struggle hearing the sounds and recognizing the sounds and words, right? So practicing listening and thinking about sounds is really the main way to establish phonemes and phonological awareness, and we'll talk about how to do that more specifically at the secondary level in a minute. Some ways to do that is through rhymes, syllables, blending those sounds together, and just in general, the main thing for me to remember the difference between phonological awareness and phonics is that phonological awareness can be done with your eyes closed. It is about recognizing hearing sounds. Hearing sounds and being able to repeat them. So it's a very speech orientated. All right, so that's an overview chapter. Let's look now at our umbrella, right? So we already discussed that we're going to look at these base skills under the umbrella of Scarborough's rope, Bloom's taxonomy, and the adolescent brain. Okay, so looking at Scarborough's rope, you'll notice that phonological awareness is all the way on the bottom. It's that light blue. And ideally, right, children in early elementary school kind of learn phonological awareness and decoding and sight recognition, while in their lives and speaking and interacting, they start, building vocabulary and getting background knowledge and things like that. And then eventually those two tie in together. What we have is with our secondary readers in secondary literacy, we have the fact that those two ropes have already been intertwined, right? So we have learners that have vocabulary knowledge, they have background knowledge, they might have a very extensive vocabulary even, but not be able to recognize the sounds in those words. And there's a telltale sign for that with secondary learners is if you try to get them to spell a word phonetically, and if you say sound it out, and they do, but you notice that what they write is not actually even the phonetics of the word. So if you're sounding a word out that maybe it has a silent E, like Blair, B-L-A-R-E, then they might spell it, if you were going to spell it phonetically, it'd be B-L-A-R, right? But someone who's missing some phonological awareness might just write B-L-R, right? They might do that. And you'll see this a lot in their writing and their spelling. And that's really how you start noticing where you have kids that are missing this skill. But that doesn't mean that they're not using figurative language and maybe even able to read a lot of sight words. But they have a hard time figuring out what words mean in text that they don't know, because they can't just sound it out in their mind and figure it out, because they're missing those phonological awareness skills. So even though they have these other skills from these other ropes, and it's all intertwined now, they're still struggling with this basic sound recognition, the very, very bottom skill needed in literacy, right? So the question then is, how can we support phonological awareness while considering these other skills? And when we look at the Bloom's taxonomy, we have similar ideas here, right? We have these struggling readers that might be able to apply information. They automatically do. Students automatically make connections in their mind with things that they already know and they already understand, right? So they're already in this green, but they're missing some of this purple because they can't necessarily remember certain information, decode basic information when they don't recognize the sounds of them, right? They might be able to evaluate and judge and say, like, that book was good and these are the reasons why, and I think this about the book, and this is what this book is about. I had a student one year who wrote a beautiful paragraph about the theme of a novel, but phonetically writing it, and since the child didn't have phonological awareness, it was difficult to interpret their meaning in what the words that they were using, because even phonetically I couldn't figure out what the words were. But when I had the child tell me, he knew the theme of the book and he had all this evidence to back it up. So again, we have this struggling low level skill, phonological awareness, that really has to do with speech and listening, but these higher level thinking skills that they are still able to apply, because we're talking about the secondary level. So you still have to consider this idea: how can we support phonological awareness while considering the other skills that this child already has, right? Okay. And the final part of our umbrella is this idea of the adolescent brain. So when you talk to a child who is missing a base level skill, you have to know that they are aware that they were supposed to learn that skill at a very young age, and they are most likely incredibly embarrassed by it. When you have a secondary student that's embarrassed, which is like all the time, by the way, they usually respond by either avoiding the thing completely, like not going to happen, or acting like they don't care. Like, oh, whatever, I know I don't have that skill, but it doesn't matter to me, because they're trying to save face for their identity in their peer group, right? Because that is like drive number one for adolescents, is their peer identity. So they need to have those phonological awareness lessons integrated into their context, integrated into the skills that they already have, integrated into the things that are important to them, and integrated into things that will make them happy and make them feel good, because we know that they need that dopamine presence to be able to make those solid synaptic connections in their brain, right? And so they need to be able to practice their other literary skills while strengthening their phonological awareness. They need to be able to still practice analyzing literature while they are still learning those skills of sound. So here are some these are just suggested activities in ways that you might integrate phonological awareness lessons into curriculum. Language arts, yes, obviously it is literacy, right? But also in the other content areas. And you'll sort of notice a theme in these, right? So because we're doing phonological awareness, this is about listening and identifying, right? So having students listen in language arts and drama, a lot of these skills, these lessons, activities would work in a drama class as well, or a speech class, anything that requires sort of literacy, speaking, and listening, right? So listening to songs or raps that the students enjoy, like something that is popular, something that they're into, that maybe some stupid TikTok song like It's Corn. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And have them identify the sound patterns while they're also still doing those other skills of thinking about, like, what is the figurative language in this song, in this rap? What does it mean when Katy Perry says, "You are a firework"? I'm not actually a firework. What does that mean? While they're also recognizing, like, oh, hey, this rhymes here. And these sounds, this, like, that line was longer than this line. And so identifying rhymes, syllables, length of lines, and things like that in songs and raps. Same sort of concept for spoken poetry. Any poetry spoken, reading to them poetry would work for this. There's tons of videos on YouTube of really powerful spoken word art. That would be really interesting for them to look at too. Have them identify sound patterns. Same thing, like they're analyzing meaning, same as with the songs and raps. Analyzing meaning, but also recognizing those sound patterns and the syllables, and why is this line longer and shorter, and all those same skills that they would be practicing with songs or raps, because poetry and songs and raps are very similar. They're all written in verse, right? Okay, so another way to practice phonological awareness in language arts and drama is have students memorize and perform poetry or songs, because then they are practicing those sound patterns, right? Another great one, especially in language arts here, is if you're doing a unit on poetry or you just implement some poetry in throughout the year, haikus and sonnets, any type of poetry that requires a certain syllable count, right? Then the students must identify those syllables. So hearing a poem and then identifying specific syllables after that. And then on the same note, that an extension activity of that would be having students mimic sound patterns back. So having students write or mimic a haiku with the exact amount of syllables and the exact amount of words. It doesn't really matter. It can be silly, it can be goofy. It doesn't have to make sense. They can use random words, but having them just recognize words that have the same amount of syllables or have the same rhyme schemes, things like that, to mimic already written work. Obviously, we can implement phonological awareness training into every content area. So there's some examples down there. Obviously, you would apply it to your specific content area. So in social studies, science, math, and any arts, music, or any other type of shop, that you could have the students listen to, watch and listen, or listen to a speech, any sort of speech that is specific to that content area. And have students identify speech patterns, right? Because a speech has this rhythm to it usually, right? So identifying the sound patterns in there, identifying how many words someone spoke before they took a pause, and what sounds did you hear repeated? Was there some alliteration there? Things like that, right? But also, at the same time, applying the speech, the information to the content area skills that they're trying to learn. And in every content area, we have very specific content words, content vocabulary words, right? So having students practice those words by speaking them and hearing each other speak them, so important. And noticing when there are words that are similar, like in the sciences, we have our ologies, right? So when students recognize the word, that sound, ologies, being able to notice that there is a pattern there and it means something. All right, well, that about wraps it up from our phonological awareness lesson. In your next activity, you'll be able to explore a little bit more and come up with some of your own ideas.